The clock read exactly 2:34 this afternoon when something unprecedented unfolded inside courtroom number 4 at the Federal District Courthouse located in Washington, D.C., and what happened in those next few minutes will echo through American history for generations to come. Standing before the packed courtroom was the jury for person, specifically juror number 7, a 47-year-old high school teacher who commutes daily from Alexandria, Virginia, and this individual gripped the official verdict form firmly with both hands, raised their eyes to meet the judge's gaze directly, and proceeded to speak aloud the words that no former commander-in-chief has ever been forced to hear inside any American courtroom in the entire 248-year history of this nation. The words came clearly, deliberately, without hesitation. On count 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States, we the jury find the defendant Donald J. Trump guilty. On count 2, obstruction of an official proceeding, we the jury find the defendant Donald J. Trump guilty. On count 3, conspiracy against rights, we the jury find the defendant Donald J. Trump guilty. The tally on every single count stood at 12-0, completely unanimous. There wasn't a single juror among the 12 who harbored even the slightest doubt. The atmosphere inside the courtroom immediately erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled frantically toward the exits, desperate to file their breaking stories. Spectators audibly gasped while some openly cried. The defense attorneys remained frozen in their seats, completely motionless. And there sat Donald Trump himself at the defense table, dressed in a dark suit with an American flag pin, carefully positioned on his lapel, his eyes fixed straight ahead into the middle distance. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his face. At precisely 2:41 p.m., a full 7 minutes after the verdict had been formally read into the record, Judge Tanya Chutkin expressed her gratitude to the jury for their dedicated service, officially dismissed them from their duties, and made the announcement that sentencing would be conducted on Friday, February 28th at 10 a.m. M-sharp. You need to subscribe to this channel immediately, and I mean right this second, because what I'm preparing to walk you through step by step is not merely a legal verdict. This represents the pivotal moment when the American legal system delivered its judgment upon a former president of the United States. This is the moment when 12 ordinary American citizens, after spending 6 full days deliberating behind closed doors, unanimously reached the conclusion that the evidence presented proved beyond any reasonable doubt whatsoever that Trump actively conspired to overturn and overthrow a legitimate election. And this is the moment when a federal judge set the sentencing date for Friday, which is now just 3 days away from this moment when the tangible consequences and real-world ramifications of that guilty verdict will finally be determined and announced. Turn on your notifications right now. Set them specifically to all, because between this moment and Friday, morning at 10 a.m., the singular question dominating every legal mind in America is this: exactly how many years will Trump spend behind bars in federal prison? But here's what nobody tells you about what actually happened during those 6 days of jury deliberations, because the detailed timeline of the jury's process reveals precisely how these 12 individuals reached their historic unanimous verdict. The jury first entered the deliberation room and began their work on Thursday, February 20th, at precisely 9:00 a.m. That entire first day was consumed with carefully reviewing the lengthy jury instructions provided by the judge and systematically organizing the mountain of evidence into manageable sections. The jury made specific requests for particular documents on day 1, including the complete transcript of the January 5th phone call between Trump and Pence, and they also requested the audio recording of Trump explicitly telling his accountant that he had lied about property values. On day 2, which fell on Friday, the jury deliberated continuously for 8 solid hours. They formally requested a complete readback of Pence's testimony, specifically the portion about the conversation in which Trump told him it was his last chance to do the right thing. On Saturday, day 3 of deliberations, the jury took a scheduled break from active deliberations, but they still asked to review specific trial exhibits over the weekend period. On Monday, which marked day 4, deliberations resumed at full intensity. The jury submitted a request to the judge asking for a precise legal definition of willful blindness, which seasoned legal observers immediately interpreted as a strong signal that they were actively considering whether Trump had deliberately and intentionally avoided knowing certain incriminating facts. On Tuesday, day 5, the jury deliberated for a grueling 9-hour stretch. They sent a formal note to the judge requesting clarification on the obstruction charge, asking specifically whether Trump had to personally be physically present in the Capitol building for the obstruction charge to have legally occurred. The judge responded in writing that physical presence was absolutely not required under the law. On Wednesday, which represented day 6 of deliberations, the process began again at 9 a.m. sharp. At exactly 1:47 p.m., the jury composed and sent a note to the judge. The note contained just 4 words. "We have reached a verdict." At precisely 2:34 p.m., the verdict was formally read, aloud in open court. Hit that like button right now if you fully understand the magnitude of what just happened here. 12 jurors, after 6 complete days of careful deliberations, unanimously found a former president of the United States guilty of serious federal crimes. The algorithm determines what content breaks through and reaches mass audiences. You are the one who decides whether this detailed analysis reaches the people who desperately need to see it. Because what I am showing you here is the American justice system doing exactly what it was originally designed to do, which is applying the law equally and fairly to everyone, regardless of their wealth, their power, or their political status in society. At 21st p.m., Trump was escorted out of the courtroom by his team of attorneys. He paused briefly at the courtroom door, turned his body to face the courtroom gallery, and stated the following words, quote, "This verdict is a disgrace. This is what a rigged system looks like. I will appeal. I will never stop fighting. The American people know the truth." He then exited the building through a side exit away from the main entrance. At 3:15 p.m., Trump held a press conference via video link from his attorney's office location. He spoke continuously for 22 minutes without interruption. He launched attacks against the judge, the jury, the prosecutors, and the entire justice system. He claimed repeatedly that the trial was rigged from the beginning. He claimed that the jurors were biased against him. The evidence presented was fabricated. He announced that he would be filing an immediate appeal, and he vowed passionately to continue running for president. He took absolutely no questions from the assembled press. Drop a comment right now. Tell me directly what you think the judge should sentence Trump to. On Friday, I am personally reading every single response, because this question has now become the most important legal question facing the entire country. At 3:47 p.m., the special counsel Jack Smith held his own press conference. He spoke briefly and directly, quote, "Today, a jury of 12 Americans, after carefully reviewing the evidence and deliberating for 6 days, unanimously found Donald Trump guilty on all 3 counts. This verdict reaffirms a principle that is foundational to our democracy. No one is above the law. Not presidents, not former presidents, not anyone. We respect the jury's verdict. We will now prepare for the sentencing hearing on Friday." Smith took several questions from reporters who were present. He declined to say what specific sentence prosecutors would recommend, saying that recommendation would be formally made at Friday's hearing. At 4:13 p.m., the White House released an official statement. Quote, "The president respects the independence of the judicial process and the jury system. He has no further comment on the verdict." At 5 p.m., reactions began pouring in from across the entire political spectrum. Share this video right now because what I'm about to explain in detail is what the guilty verdict actually means and what sentence Trump now faces. On count 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States, the maximum possible sentence is 5 years. On count 2, obstruction of an official proceeding, the maximum possible sentence is 20 years. On count 3, conspiracy against rights, the maximum possible sentence is 10 years. If the judge sentences Trump to maximum consecutive sentences on all counts, he could face up to 35 years in federal prison. But judges rarely impose maximum consecutive sentences on first-time offenders without prior criminal records. More likely, the judge will carefully consider the federal sentencing guidelines, which take into account the severity of the offense, the defendant's criminal history, and both mitigating and aggravating factors. Legal experts are predicting a sentence somewhere in the range between 8 and 15 years. The judge could also impose probation or supervised release with no prison time whatsoever, though most analysts consider that scenario unlikely, given the severity and unprecedented nature of the crimes. The judge could also impose concurrent sentences, meaning the sentences run at the same time rather than consecutively. If the sentences are concurrent, Trump would serve the longest sentence, which is the 20-year maximum for the obstruction count. At 5:34 p.m., sentencing experts began analyzing what Friday's hearing will actually look like. The prosecution will present arguments for a significant prison term. They will cite the severity of the crimes, the threat to democracy, and Trump's lack of remorse. The defense will present arguments for a lighter sentence or no prison time. They will cite Trump's age, his health, his lack of prior criminal record, and the unprecedented nature of prosecuting a former president. At 6:15 p.m., Republican members of Congress began reacting publicly. Senator Mitch McConnell issued a statement, quote, "I respect the verdict of the jury. The trial was conducted fairly. The jury deliberated for 6 days and reached a unanimous decision. That process should be respected." Senator Lindsey Graham issued a statement, "I strongly disagree with this verdict. I believe this trial was politically motivated. I believe Trump was denied a fair process, and I believe the American people will hold accountable those who weaponize the justice system." Former President George W. Bush issued a statement through a spokesperson, quote, "The jury has spoken. The legal system has worked. All Americans should accept the verdict and move forward." At 70 p.m., protests began outside the courthouse and at several Trump properties. Police were deployed to maintain order. By midnight, more than 40 protests had been reported across the country, some in support of the verdict and some against it. Here is what happens at sentencing on Friday. The hearing will begin at 10 a.m. sharp. It will start with statements from the prosecution team. Prosecutors will present a detailed sentencing memorandum arguing for a specific prison term. They will discuss the nature of the crimes, the evidence presented at trial, and the need for deterrence. Then the defense will present their sentencing memorandum, arguing for the lightest possible sentence. They may present character witnesses, medical evidence about Trump's health, and arguments about the impact of incarceration on a 78-year-old former president. Then Trump himself will have the opportunity to make a statement known as the right of allocution. This is the defendant's chance to speak directly to the judge before sentencing. Trump can apologize, express remorse, or explain his actions. Based on his public statements, however, it seems likely that Trump will use this opportunity to maintain his innocence and attack the process. After all statements are made, Judge Chutkan will impose the sentence. She will announce the length of any prison term, the terms of any supervised release, and any fines or special conditions. The sentence is immediate. If Trump is sentenced to prison, he will be taken into custody at the courthouse after the hearing. Here is what we are watching for between now and Friday. 6 indicators that will tell us what sentence Trump will receive. Indicator 1. What does the prosecution's sentencing memorandum recommend? If they ask for 12 years, the judge is unlikely to go much higher. If they ask for 20, it signals they want maximum accountability. Indicator 2. What does the defense present at sentencing? If they present medical evidence showing Trump is in poor health, it could influence the judge toward a lighter sentence. Indicator 3. Does Trump express any remorse? If he apologizes to the country and acknowledges the harm his actions caused, it could result in a lighter sentence. Based on his public statements, this seems unlikely. Indicator 4. Does Judge Chutkan signal anything in her presenting orders? If she orders a pre-sentence investigation report with specific instructions, it may hint at her thinking. Indicator 5. Do any character witnesses testify for Trump? If respected figures speak on his behalf, it could affect the judge's view. Indicator 6. Does Trump attempt to delay sentencing? If his lawyers file emergency motions to postpone Friday's hearing, it will tell us they believe the sentence will be severe. Here are 3 scenarios for Friday's sentence. Scenario 1. Trump receives a significant prison term. The judge sentences Trump to between 8 and 12 years. Given the seriousness of the crimes and the need for deterrence, the judge concludes that a substantial prison sentence is appropriate. Trump is taken into custody immediately. He is transported to a federal facility. His appeal process begins while he is incarcerated. This is the incarceration scenario. Scenario 2. Trump receives a lighter sentence. The judge sentences Trump to 2 to 4 years suspended with probation and community service. Given his age, his lack of prior record, and the unprecedented nature of the case, the judge determines that incarceration is not necessary. Trump is not imprisoned. He is subject to supervision. His appeal continues while he is free. This is the probation scenario. Scenario 3. The judge delays sentencing pending appeal. In extraordinary cases, judges sometimes delay imposing sentence to allow the appellate process to proceed. If Judge Chutkan believes the appellate questions are significant, she may sentence Trump to time served and release him pending appeal. This is the delay scenario, though it is the least likely given her handling of the case so far. Subscribe right now. Like this video. Comment with your prediction. What sentence does Trump receive on Friday? I am tracking every development, and when Judge Chutkan announces the sentence on Friday at 10 a.m., you will see the analysis here immediately. Let me show you why this verdict is historic. In 248 years of American history, no president or former president had ever been convicted of a federal crime until today. This verdict establishes that the office of the presidency does not shield anyone from criminal accountability. Establishes that a jury of ordinary citizens can evaluate evidence and reach a verdict without being swayed by the defendant's fame, wealth, or political power. It establishes that the rule of law applies equally to everyone, and it establishes a precedent that will shape how future presidents understand the limits of their power and the consequences of exceeding those limits. What I know for certain right now at 2:34 p.m. today, a jury of 12 Americans voted 12-0 to find Donald Trump guilty on all 3 federal counts. The jury deliberated for 6 days. They requested specific exhibits, clarifications of the law, and readbacks of key testimony. They asked about willful blindness. They asked about physical presence requirements. And then they voted unanimously on each count. Judge Tanya Chutkan thanked the jury, dismissed them, and set sentencing for Friday, February 28th at 10 a.m. Trump left the courthouse and held a press conference claiming the verdict was rigged. Special counsel Jack Smith held a press conference confirming the verdict and the sentencing date. The White House issued a statement respecting the verdict. Republican leaders reacted across the spectrum from accepting the verdict to attacking it. Protests erupted across the country, and between now and Friday at 10 a.m., the question is what sentence a former president of the United States will receive for conspiring to overthrow an election. This verdict is the product of 6 days of deliberations, 47 witnesses, weeks of testimony, thousands of pages of documents and recordings of Trump in his own words. The jury considered everything. They asked the questions that needed to be asked, and they reached a unanimous conclusion. The verdict is in. The jury has spoken. 12 Americans randomly selected with no obligation to convict, and every reason to be cautious about convicting a former president concluded unanimously that the evidence proved guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And on Friday, the judge will determine what that guilt means in terms of years. Stay with this channel. Turn on notifications. When Judge Chutkan announces the sentence on Friday morning, you will see the analysis here live. This is the verdict.